Its potential as a medical research tool is all but limitless.
Even though they don't have the actual strength to pick up a real object, they can pick up a virtual object, and they can learn now fine motor tasks and coordination skills before they actually have the strength to do it in real life with real objects.
And scientists are already using the technology. But will virtual reality transport millions of us into an addictive world of make-believe?
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
The critics, for the most part, loved it. You, on the other hand, seem to be staying away from it in droves. Wild Palms does not appear to be the ratings success that this network had hoped for, or that we expected when we decided to do a program on virtual reality. What a tie-in, we thought. Millions of you intoxicated by a story based on the sinister misuse of virtual reality. Why, you'll be drooling to learn more about the technology. Well, if you'll be kind enough to just drool a little, it's actually a fascinating subject. The moral and social consequences of being able to do, or at least have the illusion of doing almost anything, is quite literally mind-boggling. You might, for example, rampage through the 10 Commandments without injuring anyone but yourself. It does raise some interesting questions about the moral implications of virtual theft, murder, or adultery. Perhaps we'll get to that a little later on. For the moment, though, science correspondent Michael Gillen introduces us to some of the many virtues of virtual reality.
This is reality.
Hi, Minnie.
This is not. But what about this? Or this? Special effects make the unreal seem real, but on a flat two-dimensional screen, there's a limit to their deceptions. Not so with virtual reality. In its simplest form, virtual reality immerses your sense of sight. For example, with this helmet on, 2 tiny TV monitors feed your eyes computer-generated images, in this case of Death Valley. Now, this helmet is wired to the computer so that when you move your head to the left or to the right, the images also move to the left and right. So to your eyes, you're no longer here, you're actually in there. With a virtual reality or VR helmet, your eyes can wander through a computer-generated battlefield or through the rooms of a house designed but not yet built. And ultrasound images piped into this doctor's helmet makes him believe he's got X-ray vision, exploring the womb of a pregnant woman with his eyes.
By using virtual reality and you feel as if you're there, you have all of the natural skills that a person brings to bear on that environment. So you feel as if you can naturally interact with that environment, and so you can explore it and understand it more easily.
Michael McGreevy and his colleagues are the ultimate armchair explorers. With VR, they can walk through the hills and valleys of other planets without ever leaving their lab at NASA's Ames Research Center in Northern California.
With virtual reality, many more people can explore in a much more rich way. So now we can have school children, planetary geologists of all ages, from graduate school to perhaps a geologist who's too old to physically accompany the astronauts.
VR helmets are bulky and detract from the experience. So companies are developing VR glasses, and ultimately, VR images will be beamed directly into the eyes by tiny projectors.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, solid rocket ignition, and liftoff.
In the real world, not just sights, but sounds are important. That's why Elizabeth Wenzel at NASA's Ames Research Center is perfecting a VR headset that can play tricks on our sense of hearing. It's coming to me from the top, but when I point it down, it does sound like the sound is coming from down there. When it comes to sounds, JARON Lanier is a virtuoso. He can play dozens of real instruments, but also dozens of virtual instruments, like the rhythm gimbal or the cyber xylo. Not bad for a self-taught high school dropout who 9 years ago founded one of the first virtual reality companies in the world. Like others, Lanier is pursuing the holy grail of virtual reality, pursuing ways of immersing people's senses beyond just sight and sound.
What we've discovered is that creating a feeling of reality is not just creating sensation coming in, but it's the interactivity. It's when you can reach out and change the world. You can pick up an apple on the table and toss it. That's when it becomes real.
For the sense of touch, scientists have developed various VR gloves. Sensors keep track of your real movements, then command the computer to duplicate them inside the virtual world. At California's Loma Linda University Medical Center, virtual reality gloves are giving paralyzed patients a helping hand.
Even though they don't have the actual strength to pick up a real object, they can pick up a virtual object, and they can learn now fine motor tasks and coordination skills before they actually have the strength to do it in real life with real objects.
At the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, scientists using this VR hand can actually feel the pushes and pulls of the imaginary molecules they move around. By developing a feel for how atoms attract and repel, scientists hope to assemble medicines never before imagined, building them from scratch, one atom at a time. In the future, people will wear not just helmets and gloves, but entire bodysuits called exoskeletons, the better to immerse their senses in virtual reality.
I can see a time in the foreseeable future when the technology will allow us to smell and to taste things also.
Harry, you might feel a little nauseous at first.
Right.
And what about this evening's Wild Palms?
Virtual reality in 2007 is not going to look like it looks in Wild Palms. In fact, it never will, because virtual reality is always going to look a little different than reality. It just has to.
Why?
Because virtual reality has images that come through a computer on their way to you. They have to come through the computer because that's what makes them interactive. But when they go through the computer, they become a little computery. They become slightly cartoonish. And in Wild Palms, they use live actors. And we're not going to get that good by 2007.
Virtual reality, however, has left the lab and is coming to our neighborhoods. Right now, for example, virtual reality theaters are being planned all over the world. And this fall, Sega plans to market the first affordable VR helmet for home use, a device that can enhance and distort our sense of reality, all for the cost of about $200. For Nightline, I'm Michael Gillen in Los Angeles.
When we come back, one of the creators of virtual reality and a professor who is concerned about its negative impact on society. JARON Lanier is the scientist who coined the phrase virtual reality and is now working on several medical applications for the technology. He joins us from our San Francisco bureau. Dr. Frank BIOCCA is the director of the Communications Center at the University of North Carolina. Dr. BIOCCA has calculated that virtual reality may, in the future, consume as much as 15 to 20 years of a person's life. He joins us from our North Carolina affiliate, WTVD. Was that a little snort of disbelief, Mr. Lanier? Or?
Oh, it's an amusing notion. I doubt it's true. I doubt it's true. Virtual reality is hard to use for extended periods of time. It's a little bit like riding a bicycle. You actually get tired after a while, you know, so. But I don't know, maybe those hours would build up.
What intrigues you most about it, the technical application or the moral and social implications?
Well, what intrigues me about it is it's a wonderful, inspirational future for the human imagination. I can't put it any simpler than that. We as a culture are very much in love with technology. We do so many things with it, and I came to believe quite a while ago that we were making more technology than we really needed. The only real problems we have these days are diseases and natural disasters. All of the other problems technology was meant to solve are really solved, and all of our real problems are caused by our own behavior. So when we start to think about the technologies that we want to create for the future. We want to think about technologies that will create wonderful adventures for us and wonderful new ways of meeting each other and new types of beauty and so forth. And so I think this is an ideal type of technology to focus on, and that's essentially what it means to me.
Dr. BIOCCA, as you look at Michael Gillen's report and you look at some of the technical applications and some of the wonderful ways in which people are already being helped by the use of virtual reality, is that your problem, or are you more concerned with it as a form of entertainment?
No, I'm not concerned so much with with some of the positive aspects of virtual reality technology. It's absolutely amazing technology with an amazing potential. One of the things we need to think about is to look at the example of television. Back in 1941, as television started to head towards our homes, few people knew that basically this sort of black and white image, snow-spotted black and white image, would have the psychological, social, and cultural impact that it has over all these years. It was a technology with an odd little name, television, vision at a distance. Think about this new technology, virtual reality. Potentially sort of unlimited potential, both for educational and for potentially negative consequences.
Well, go ahead. Run through 2 or 3 of the things that concern you about it most.
Well, you know, one of the things we have to consider now, we're far more sophisticated about the impact of the diffusion of communication technologies. We're aware that we live in an information environment. Now when we see a technology of virtual reality, we ask, is this a tool, toy, or tyrant? And we're going to ask these questions about virtual reality technology. Famous sort of historian of technology, Lewis Mumford, used to argue that there were 2 kinds of technology, a democratic one and an authoritarian one. One that actually empowered individuals, one that enslaved people, one that was man-centered, one that was machine-centered. In some ways, though, he was wrong in that there really are not 2 kinds of technologies. These are 2 sides of the face of each technology, and especially communication technology.
All right, talk about for a moment, and let me get back to Mr. Lanier for a second here. Talk about the empowerment. How is this technology going to empower us?
Well,
wait. Go ahead, Jaron.
My turn, Frank. Yeah, well, I just wanted to make a comment on television, which is that television could have turned out much better than it is. I want to point that out. I mean, with all due respect to ABC and all, television is actually a bit better in England than it is in the United States. And I think there are a lot of things about the structure of television that inherently make it the kind of zombifying thing it can be for kids and for some of the rest of us. But at the same time, the culture that we create around a new technology is something that I think we can take responsibility for. And one of the great things about virtual reality is it's a chance to start over. I mean, it hasn't started yet, and if people are aware of the importance of media in our lives, and if we take some responsibility to try to turn the next wave of media into something wonderful, we can really have an impact.
But you're not going to have any control over that, are you? I mean, I see now that, or at least just heard from Michael, that I forget which company it was. Was it Sony? Siaga is going to come out with this $200 set. What is that $200 set going to be able to do?
Yeah, I actually used to be involved with that project. Well, that's not really virtual reality. What that is it's a virtual reality helmet on a video game. And video games, for me, are almost more dangerous than television because they're just a little bit interactive, but what they do is they put kids through paces. The kids sort of repeat compulsively the same activities again and again to get better at the game, and so they become like rats in a lab maze. And I'm not sure that that's really an improvement. To me, the real empowerment comes at a future stage when virtual reality is truly interactive, which is something that's inevitable. You have to understand that virtual reality only becomes magical and only becomes real when it is truly interactive, and that has profound implications. One of the ways I like to describe it is it's almost permission for childhood. It creates an adult version of make-believe that's supported by technology, and I can't imagine anything more empowering than that. It's a wonderful validation of the imagination.
We're going to have to take a short break. When we come back, I'd like you both to think about the fact that while you may have some wonderful ideas, each of you, as to how virtual reality can be used to do good, it is ultimately the business interests that are going to decide how they can make the most money out of the technology and what you think the tugging and pulling will do between those 2 forces. We'll be back in just a moment. And we're back with JARON Lanier and Dr. Frank BIOCCA. Dr. BIOCCA, just before the break, JARON Lanier was making the observation that we have an opportunity now to sort of set the agenda for this new technology. And I raised the question whether indeed it's going to be the well-motivated scientists who are going to set the agenda or the economic interests who are going to say, no, we can make more money doing it this way. What do you think?
Well, technologies don't in themselves have an effect. Virtual reality right now is in play, and we are the players. But the technology we're looking at now is not a mature technology. It has a long way to evolve. And that's why, for example, as JARON mentioned, it's very difficult to spend a lot of time inside the medium at the moment. It in itself is, to some degree, irritating and potentially can create a sense of sort of motion sickness, kind of simulation sickness. There's no doubt that the business interests will be interested, obviously, in making a great deal of money with this particular technology. And scientists will be looking for a number of very positive applications. But clearly, though, this is probably a more decentralized medium than television. Television, you had control at the center determining the content and structure of it. Here you have a medium that allows a number of programs to create their own environments, which can take many shapes and forms. One of the problems we have, though, is we're concerned often about the type of content that appears inside a medium. And clearly, there's no doubt that, some media can produce both pro-social and anti-social behavior in an individual, at least stimulate behavior in that direction.
Let me jump in at this point, because it seems to me that what we're talking about here is, by its very nature, an anti-social kind of medium. In that television, for example, is already anti-social as compared to sitting around and talking around a dinner table. But it is far more social in that 2 or 3 of you can be sitting along a couch watching the same program. In virtual reality, and let me ask you, JARON Lanier, in virtual reality, it is by definition, is it not, a solo-type enterprise?
No, you couldn't be more wrong, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with JARON on that one.
How often do your guests tell you that?
No, please, tell me.
Okay. Inside virtual reality, you're in a synthetic world. Now, the most interesting things in that world are other people in disguise. Now, let me explain that for a second. See, when there can be all sorts of things in a virtual world, but any particular object is, it's just a computer-defined object. You can have millions of them. The really interesting stuff is when there's other people there with you. You see, you can be in virtual reality with other people. You can play tennis with them, you can dance with them, you can play music with them, and you can take on dreams with them. You can each become animals, and you can fly through the sky and all of these things. But the key is that those other people are far more interesting, far more entertaining, and they stand out far more than all of the dead objects. So I think people will always be drawn to the social use of virtual reality. There's really no comparison when you've tried both of them.
Go ahead, Dr. BIOCCA.
And also, Ted, I think you need to make a distinction between what in computer jargon would be referred to as the computer interface and then the communication system that's connected. One of the interesting things about this medium, and I believe this is its ultimate destination as a mass communication medium, is that virtual reality technology is likely to be a portal, a gateway to a larger communication system that we are in the process of putting together. This usually comes under the discussion of electronic superhighway. We're in the process of laying in fiber optic cable to every home in America. We are also right in the process right now of connecting every major computer in America and eventually the world. When we connect all of these systems together, we'll have one gigantic communication network, a sea of information. And it's already emerged with a name, and the name that people have given it is cyberspace. The reason it's cyberspace is that it has not only just text and still pictures and moving pictures, you will have inside of it 3D simulations. Individual connected to a virtual reality interface will use that as a way to travel and navigate. It'll be a ship within cyberspace to travel within the kind of information that is available in all its forms in this massive sea, this ocean of information.
Let me just interrupt you once again, because I fear we're starting to run out of time. Once again, I still have the sense, though, I mean, if I'm engaged in that kind of reality, what happens to reality itself on the outside? Aren't I going to be disinclined to participate in that?
No, reality on the outside will look better than it ever has before. You see, when you have some other thing to compare the everyday world to, you're going to notice for the first time how miraculous the everyday world is. There's a wonderful experience when you're inside virtual reality and you come out. Everything looks a little bit more detailed and a little brighter and more wonderful than it usually does. It's a wonderful eye-opener. So I'm positive that people will never confuse the two worlds. I'm also positive people won't get lost inside the virtual world. The physical world is absolutely marvelous. The only thing wrong with it is you can't make your imagination real. You can't make dreams real. You're stuck with the same old buildings, the same old bodies, everything every day. And so this is just a chance to validate that internal part that you normally can't share as easily.
Dr. BIOCCA, we're not only down to our last 40 seconds, we have a virtual satellite working with you, which is not working too well at the moment, so go ahead and make your final comment, if you would.
Well, you know, there is really a downside we need to consider, and that goes back to the amount of time you spend in this world. At the outset, you mentioned, for example, the 15 years. Right now, someone born into a system in which we have television as a primary medium spends 7 years of their waking lives watching television. If this becomes a medium that replaces the telephone, the computer, and television, if you add up the amount of hours you spend with all those media, you can, in theory, spend 15 to 20 years inside virtual reality. Is that necessarily a negative experience? It remains to be seen. We obviously have mixed emotions about it, some negative feelings about participating in a totally artificial environment, but this is one potential destination.
All right, when it comes to time, I'm afraid we're dealing with real reality. Our time is up. Thank you both. JARON,
Oh,
Lanier,
thank you very much.
Thank you,
I
Ted.
appreciate you both being with us. Thank you.